Terry from Vermont was raised Roman Catholic and says, now I agree with you guys more than I do theists that I come in contact with. How you doing, Terry?
Hey, how's it going, guys? Thank you for taking my call.
Hi.
Absolutely, Terry. What's on your mind?
Well, I just wanted to say that I was raised Roman Catholic, and I've been to many, many churches over the years. And I remember them saying, read the Bible, and you'll find the truth. And what I found was more inconsistencies than I could shake a stick at.
I mean, yeah, that was kind of my experience. Was the Bible itself seemed to be one of the largest barriers to believing the truthfulness and the validity of the Christian message. But I think even if you're not really like reading the Bible intently, just thinking about some of the concepts can get you to the same conclusion. Like Sarah was talking previously about how hell doesn't really make any sense, but neither does heaven. Heaven doesn't make any sense. It certainly doesn't seem to square with any of our known physical laws. Where would heaven be? Have we ever observed a completely immaterial realm where spirits are floating around? No, like none of these things make sense if you just think about them for a little bit.
Well, I remember when Stephen Hawking met the Pope. I think it was 1985 or 86. He asked him a question. He said, "Is the universe infinite?" And the Pope said, "Yes." And Stephen said, "Well, then what room is there for your God?" And the Pope didn't have an answer.
That's a good question, right? I know for me personally,
every time I engage with. Every time I engage in any sort of a conversation with Christians, they like to use circular arguments. And, they believe there is a God. I said, well, what proof do you have? And they go, the Bible. I said, well, other than the Bible, what do you have? And they said, that's all I need. And they just keep talking in circles. And no matter how you shoot them down, they don't seem to get it. They don't seem to understand that the Bible isn't proof. Because if you even look at the Christian religion or any religions, they go by a book, and their books are faith. Their books are not proof.
Mm-hmm. Indeed.
Yeah, I heard a really good explanation for that once. Actually, when I was deconstructing that belief isn't just something you come to logically, but consider it more like a footstool. And so you have your belief and many things, there are many legs on your footstool. And so it's why when you talk to someone who has any type of religious belief, describing one logical error isn't going to change that belief, because it's not just logic that holds it up. You have experiences and culture and family and psychology, that are all holding up that belief. So even if you knock one of the legs out, you still have all those other legs holding it up.
Well, it's funny. I thought that when the Jonestown massacre happened, I think it was in 1978 or 79, I would have thought that people would have gotten a clue. But now these television evangelists in their megachurches are making more money and fooling more people than ever. And I really it boggles my mind to think how people could fall into that trap.
Yeah, well, I think if you're raised in it, like you were raised Catholic, right? I think if you're raised in it,
Yeah.
it can be difficult to question what you were raised in. I know for me, I grew up in a very religious background, even though my family wasn't super religious. And so there are a lot of things you just accept as true, right? So when you start to deconstruct that in your adult years, it's hard to throw it all away right at once. And if you never deconstruct, like if you just swallow the whole hog, then there's really not a whole lot of limits as to what you won't swallow. Like if you're willing to buy it hook, line, and sinker, they can just keep adding more worms on that hook. I mean, there's not a lot of limits.
Yeah, I've tried. I've tried to believe, and I've tried to see what was the payoff, or what was the rationale, or what was the logic, and just found that there really isn't much logic anymore. They say the Roman Catholics. I have to admit one thing about them: if they can't explain something, they go, "Well, it's a mystery of faith." Whereas
Yeah.
typical Protestant or evangelicals, they'll talk in circles, for hours, and it's it's just kind of funny. So I don't even bother getting into that. About a few weeks ago, I was walking and I saw a couple of Mormon missionaries, and they asked if I wanted to hear the word of Jesus Christ, and I said no. I said I'm a secular humanitarian, and they were totally stunned. They didn't even know what that was.
Yeah. I mean, to be fair, we're not a huge percentage of the population. Like in my life, I can count on one hand, like the atheists that I personally know. Sarah's probably the same. I don't know if we're surrounded by a lot of people that are of this variety.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, for sure.
Well, I can't say that I'm an atheist, but I know darn well that I'm not I'll put it to you this way: if there is a God, if it is not what they're telling me it is, it can't, because
Right.
what they're telling me does not make sense.
Right. Yeah, we couldn't agree more. Oh, sorry, go ahead, sir.
Well, I was just going to say it
Oh.
would be very unjust for that God to expect you to worship and serve him if that God doesn't make any sense. I've had many people in my lives tell me things like, well, I don't get it either, but we just have to obey and worship. But I think it would be very unreasonable for God to create a situation where you can't understand him and he doesn't make sense, and yet somehow expect you to worship him. So I agree with you.
Yeah, well, I agree with you too. It's it just when you start you call it deconstruction. When you start examining the evidence, you got and when I point out some of the inconsistencies, they go, "Oh, well, we don't do the Old Testament anymore." Now, this is what really got me when my wife joined this new church. It's a very small local Baptist church. The pastor, one of the first things he said was Thomas Jefferson cut out parts of the Bible. If he didn't agree with it, then he cut out part of the Bible. He said, you have to accept the whole Bible. So one day I nailed him with something in the Bible, and it was about circumcision. And I said, in the Old Testament, it says you have to do it, and the New Testament says it doesn't. Oh, he says, we don't go by the Old Testament anymore. So you can see how they rationalize and justify anything to try to, prove their point. And rather than actually prove their point, I thought he made himself look stupid.
I mean, that'll do it, right? When almost 2/3 of your holy book is the Old Testament, it's awfully silly to say, well, none of that's now relevant. Well, if the Old Testament says that you're going to circumcise your children forever, which it does in Ezekiel 44 and elsewhere, like Deuteronomy 30, if that's what it says, and then there's a 2.0, there's a patch update, and the patch update says, we were just joking about that circumcision forever bit. I mean, that's just a flat contradiction. God can't contradict himself. Like, you can have updates, you can have changes of direction maybe, but you can't have straight contradictions. God's not allowed to contradict himself.
Yeah, and because at that time they were trying to get me to get baptized in the church, and I said, I don't see the need for it. And they said, I don't see the need for religious ritual. And they said, well, what do you mean? What ritual? So I said circumcision, and he just laughed and he said, we don't do that anymore. It's like, well, it's in your book,
Right.
So,
right.
Don't try to blow smoke, because I read it and I know what it says.
Well, the final thing too that I'll say on circumcision is, like, even in the Western world, like, we were raised that we need to be circumcised and baptized as babies, right? I was baptized as a baby. I was circumcised as a baby because it's just what Christians do, right? Which is really funny, because Paul says in the New Testament that if you take the marks of circumcision, Christ is of no use to you. So even on their own doctrine, they have no idea what they're doing. Like, if the New Testament clearly taught that you do not need circumcision, why does the Christian West insist on mutilating the genitals of little boys in order to maintain a doctrine they don't believe in? Like, they're so confused and tied up amongst themselves because they don't even read the book.
Yeah, well, you see, here in America, they went another route that nobody else has gone, and that is they say there's a medical benefit, which there isn't. But the United States is the only country that does that for medical reasons. And that's how they sort of skirted around that. They say, oh, well, it's healthier, and oh, I want my son to look like his father, or I don't want him to look different in the locker room. And they use 1,001 excuses, and it reminds me just of what the Christians do with the Bible. They'll make excuses for anything.
Right. No, it's true.
And I think what you were talking about baptism too is such an example of how the Bible is not clear, even when we're simply looking at the New Testament, which is supposed to be what we all use now. If you ask a Christian, do you have to be baptized in order to go to heaven? You ask 10 Christians and you might get 10 different answers, because it is contradictory. What did Jesus say about it? What did John say about it? What did Paul say about it? Can you baptize someone as an infant? How does that work? What's happening when you do it as an infant? There are some Christians who believe, no, you must be fully immersed and you must be an adult. It's just not clear. And when something as significant as salvation is at stake, you would think the book would be crystal clear, but it's not.
Well, our argument ended this way, and it got rather hostile, and I was very close to punching him out.
Oh no!
Don't do that.
Right in front of my own wife. Right in front of my own wife. He said, "Well, you were baptized a Catholic." I said, "Yes, I was." He says, "Well, that doesn't count because you could not give consent. We only baptize, when a person can give consent." I said, "Yeah, but you circumcised your 2 boys, and I'm sure they didn't consent." Oh, and then it got really mad. He said, "You have to do this because the Bible says so." I said, "No, I don't, and I'm not going to." That's it. I said, "This conversation's over."
Yeah. Well, we're glad that it didn't lead to fisticuffs. We certainly don't want that for anyone.
Well, he's a lot bigger than I am, so it wouldn't have gone well for me, but I was that irate. I could not believe he was saying crap like this,
Yeah, we get it. We've heard it before.
And justify his Bible,
Right. Yeah, we've heard it all before, for sure. Well, listen, Terry, we really appreciate you coming up and having a chat with us.